Here we go. It looks like... Can you go to YouTube and see if you can see that we're streaming? What's up, team? If you can hear us, we are live, obviously. But we're just working this out because Yanni and I haven't done this for a little while. And
yeah, we're live.
There we go. Woohoo! Welcome to the stream, everybody. The Dream Team's back. Yanni and I are doing our best to make a commitment to start live streaming to you all once a week. And I say the reason why we're doing our best is because things are different now from when they were back at Unity Gym. Hey, Yanni, like we had our own studio. You know, like the kids were at school. We could commit to doing an 8 a.m. time, but work from home with parents and Yanni being a single parent, it poses some challenges that we hadn't faced before, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, I've got a little army that's going to be to no end, just finding new things they need to hassle me about right at this moment as they wake up. But I thought we'd almost got in there before the kids had woken up. But it's like bird chirp early here in Sydney, Australia. I don't usually get up at the crack of dawn, and you can still see I look like I'm crying because I've got a special stuff I've got to put in my eyes because I got eye poked really badly, and anyway, long story. I'm not crying.
I thought you were just upset.
No. It's because I try to wash it out under a cold shower, but it doesn't come out that early.
I thought you were having a cry because you've had to get up so early. I thought, oh man, come on, it's not that bad. Hi Yash, we got Yash on the live stream. Thank you for tuning in, mate, and thank you for saying hello. So today we are going to, Yanni and I, we've spoken about this. One thing that we feel that we've dropped the ball on is going live to you guys, and so we want to do this. We want to try to make a commitment, and something that we haven't talked about for a while that for me is quite near and dear to me because it's something that I've been focusing on for the first time in my life, really, for the last 2 years, is how to build muscle, and how to build muscle as a dad or a mum who is, over the age of 35. Most of our audience are over the age of 35. A lot of you are in your 40s and even 50s. It does get harder because testosterone starts to go on the decline, and it's not just that. It's life is tougher to follow a plan. So what we're going to talk about first is we're going to just briefly talk about the way that we go about building muscle, and I'll ask Yanni a bunch of questions because he's done he's worked with some incredible people in the world. The late great Charles Poliquin, Ben Pakulski, who's an ex-Mr. Olympia bodybuilder, and among many others. So Yanni's got a lot of knowledge when it comes to building muscle. And Yanni and I have both, I wish I could find this older picture, and maybe I will when you're talking. Maybe I will find the picture of Yanni from when he was younger, because I've got a classic picture of Yanni when he's really small. But Yanni and I both have put on a lot of muscle since when we were kids. Yanni was very, very skinny when he was a teenager, and to be honest, so was I. And in the past 2 years alone, I've put on almost 10 kilos now, which is 22 pounds. So we're doing okay for people our age.
Apparently, I've gotten very serious as well. Put
that was up again. Man. I just had to throw a thumbnail together this morning, and if you knew how terrible Yanni photographs, he seems to be allergic to the camera, and he just it's really hard to find a picture of him that he's happy with and that I'm happy with. So that's what I found. There it is. So look, the first thing we'll talk about is Yanni, why don't you talk about basically just what's the general thing that has to go on in the body? What's the process to build muscle? Like you've woken up one day, you've decided I want to build muscle. I'm going to go to YouTube. What do I do? What does that person need to know?
Yeah, I try and say it as in as simple form as possible. There's a couple of things that have to happen, and and these are slightly nuanced based on your genetics a little bit, and then other lifestyle factors come into play. But effectively, it's just a process of stimulating the body in a certain way, and that's kind of like putting a stress load on the body. We do that through resistance training exercise, and then feeding the body in such a manner that you're in a calorie surplus and you meet the dietary protein needs to create an environment that's conducive to building muscle tissue or enlarging. It's actually more about enlarging the cell, hypertrophying the cell in the muscle. And there's a bunch of physiological adaptations that occur there. We don't need to really get into the minutiae of it, but and I know I want to be very careful with the nomenclature that I use here to explain it, so that we just keep it simple. It's just really stimulate the body in the gym with resistance training exercise, and we'll talk a little bit more about the best ways to do that today. And then make sure that you feed the body and recover to create an environment conducive of building muscle tissue. And I guess we'll go into those three factors as well. But mostly it's about dietary protein intake. That's where a lot of people get it wrong, because muscles are mostly protein and water. And the on switch for muscle protein synthesis seems to be the protein in our diets itself. So if you're having a really poor diet that doesn't consume of a lot of dietary protein, or poor quality dietary protein, because not all proteins are created equal in the relevance of building muscle, then you're less likely to be successful in that process of building muscle tissue. So does that kind of frame it up, Rad?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's a good little, gist of it. So it's, in a nutshell, like if we summarize that, the way that you build muscle is you go to the gym, you lift weights, you do what's called resistance training. That causes damage to the muscle fibers, which creates a hormonal response in the body. And the body basically says, oh my God, I want to be able to respond to that better the next time it happens. Let's get bigger, let's get thicker, let's get stronger. Give me some protein. And then when you feed the body the protein that it needs and you give it the recovery it needs, then that's how growth occurs in a nutshell. Yeah. Is that a good little nutshell sort of way of describing?
I think so. Yeah, good little summary. Now, and I think we'll get into this in a sec. What a lot of people don't understand is that there's different tissues in the body, obviously, and those different tissues, and of course I'm talking about bone, tendon, ligament, and muscle tissue. Those different tissues adapt to the stress at different times, at different rates. And so this is where a lot of people fall into trouble, because we go to the gym, we get very excited, we lift some weights, it feels good, we see and feel a difference, and that difference is usually first in the central nervous system's ability to fire up those muscles and get them to do what we need them to do. There's a series of lessons occurring there, adaptations occurring, where we're just literally learning to coordinate different muscles so that the joint moves more efficiently, so that our form and technique starts to get better. And that all happens very quickly. And then the second response is that the muscle tissue itself starts to enlarge, starts to hypertrophy, starts to grow. And most people just think about those two things. But there are other adaptations occurring deeper that we don't see, that don't meet the eye, that are happening in the joints themselves. So the tendons that join the muscle to the bone and the ligaments that join bone to bone, those tissues take months and even in some cases many months to adapt. And then that's where program periodization and load management and progressive overload come into play and become really, really important. Because if you try to, constantly design programs based on the very early adaptations that are occurring, which is very easy to do and something that we all tend to want to do. We want to race into the really advanced stuff first, because that gives us the biggest pump. It makes the best workout. We sweat, the heart rate goes up. We tend to burn more calories doing those style of workouts, so we get leaner. So they're very appealing, but they tend to fast track the load management process, and then we're only matching the workout intensity to the very early adaptations that occur, and we tend to end up with injuries, overuse injuries in the tendonitis, things like that really can become a problem and become very discouraging, and people tend to quit really quickly, So I think we'll probably talk about that more, and we'll talk about the different ways that you can load a muscle to, I guess, speed up the process of hypertrophy, because not all muscle contraction is created equal when it comes to building muscle size. And there are certain ways that we can train to really, I guess, boost the process.
Well, I think that's a really good segue to get into the way that we start people with a muscle hypertrophy program, because the risk of injury is huge, and so people, underestimate how much damage that can cause to your joints when you're really going heavy and you're trying to push hard. And of course, a lot of people go to the gym being guided by their buddy who went to the gym being guided by their buddy, and there's just a lot of bro science sort of being passed down. And you see a lot of people that have stories where they've gone to the gym with their friend, and within a couple of months they've done their back, or they've done their shoulder, usually back or shoulders or knees are the common ones, from trying to squat, deadlift or bench press or shoulder press when they just weren't ready for it. And for that reason, even for more experienced people, because the more experienced people have often got more imbalances that have come, from longer periods of time where they've been training in a way that doesn't promote structural balance. So what we do is, when anybody starts with us, we go through a 3-program phase of structural balance. And those program phases can last anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks. If somebody's more experienced and more conditioned, you can reduce the duration of each of those phases to 2 weeks. And if someone's less experienced, we go up for more like that 4-week mark. And the purpose of a structural balance phase is really to prepare the body for the demands of hypertrophy training. Because when I started hypertrophy training with Yanni, I'd never done it before. I did Kung Fu when I was in my 20s, and Yanni did bodybuilding. So Yanni was much more experienced with hypertrophy training than me. And then when I got out of the army and I came to start training with Yanni, he put me through a year of hypertrophy training with him. And man, it's like, Yanni used to say this to me all the time. He said, you're going to war with your muscles. And man, you are. Like, you're trying to cause as much damage to those muscle fibers as you can, so that you can get create that stimulus that, creates the adaptation. And it's a lot of work, and it's high risk for people that aren't prepared for it. And then once we get through that structural balance phase, that's when we take the training wheels off. That's when we start doing the overload techniques. Yanni, maybe do you want to talk a little bit about that, about what happens after that structural balance phase?
Very quickly, I don't like to use the word damage. I think that damaging the muscle is not a good way to explain the process. I think more just explaining that we put stress on the body. We have to stress the muscle tissue in order for it to grow, because otherwise people just take it out of context and they can really mess up. Now, the other thing, speaking about putting training wheels on, that initial phase of training where we're working for structural balance, it's actually a really, really good idea for a number of reasons, not just to balance the body so that all of the joints have this sort of symbiotic relationship and they're working functional. We have stability. We're reducing joint glide, where the bone is moving around too much inside the capsule in the shoulder and hip. And, there's all these things that happen that are really, really important. It also dramatically improves the efficiency of the body, the way that we can move and produce force in our joints safely. But it's, again, giving us, because while we're doing structural balance training, we're not trying to lift maximal load in the same way that you do when you're doing more advanced training to failure, things like that. And so it gives your body this really nice period of time, usually about 12 weeks in the initial phases, to get all those deeper tissues adapting to the load. All of the tendons in the forearms and elbows and shoulders, the ligaments in the forearms and elbows and shoulders. Because remember, those tissues take a lot longer. They get less blood flow. It's really effectively that they get less blood flow. So they're getting less of the nutrients and the chemicals that they need. And so they kind of, I'm trying to think of an analogy that would make me sound smart, but I can't. It's too early in the morning. They effectively, they just get less of all the good stuff that happens from the exercise, and so and they're a different type of tissue. They're a more dense tissue, and so they take a lot longer to adapt to the stimulus. The problem is that if you injure a tendon or a ligament, it takes a lot longer to heal as well. So because of exactly the same reason. So you really want to avoid that. So that initial period of structural balance training, it's not so much about putting the training wheels on. It's probably more about pulling the reins and just going, hey, let's just pulling the reins on the metaphorical horse, and and slowing everything down and saying, let's allow these deeper tissues to adapt as well, bring them up to par, so that when we hit, in our program, it's from phase 4 or 5 on, we start to use overload methods. And overload methods are exactly the way they sound. It's about making the workout more efficient and effective by, I guess, condensing more into it, without making the time of the workout take longer. So we're getting more tension on the muscle, on the muscle tissues, maybe even more time under tension, and things like that. And that's that's where we really start to see results. Interestingly enough, though, if you're really new to strength training or resistance training, you will see an enormous increase in your strength capacity and also your muscle size in the first 12 weeks of training, even though you're not using these fancy overload methods, because you adapt to the stimulus very, very radically in the beginning. It's kind of like it's like any sort of exercise. Your fastest rate of adaptation occurs early, and then from there it sort of slows down and things get a little bit trickier, a little bit harder to get the body to have the same process. So I wouldn't worry that you're not going to get a result in the initial phases. And Rad and I have also experienced really interesting results where someone who's quite savvy and used to training gets a really, really good result, even though they've been sort of pulled back to do this initial structural balance training, because they hit parts of the body that they've probably neglected or never even known how to train before. Rad, you would...
Well, it's also that they learn how to contract their muscles properly. I think that's a really big thing, and that's something that I continue to work on. Like, we've worked with some of the best coaches in the world in their field, and the two that I can think of that are noteworthy is Ben Pakulski, who's an ex-Mr. Olympia bodybuilder. I'll pull him up in a sec. And Sebastian Oreb, who's a power lifter and a trainer of the strongest people in the world. And both those guys in their own fields are at the top of their game. Ben for building muscle and Bass for building strength. And the way that those, like Yanni and I have been in the room watching them coach people, especially with Bass, because he was a trainer at our gym for a year, and Yanni worked with him at Fitness First for almost a decade. We've heard those guys coach over and over again, and the amount that they talk about just the basics, just to be able to get your scapula in the right place, for example, when you're doing bench pressing, whether you're into powerlifting for maximal strength or whether you want to build muscle. Ben Pakulski talks about that your ability to build your chest is going to, or your ability to contract your pecs is directly related to your ability to retract your scapula. So like if one is dysfunctional, the other isn't going to be able to function well. And so by going back to that beginner stages, even for somebody that's been training for a long, long time, they get so much out of just refining their technique and going, oh, that's how you set your scapula to be able to do a chest press and how you contract your pecs, or that's where your humerus should be when you're doing a bicep curl. So everybody gets great results from it. You'd be amazed at how good a result you'll get just from working with a coach if you're somebody that's never done it. I think that's a big part of it as well, because I still get that. I mean, I've been training my whole life, but as soon as I work with a coach and they're giving me something and giving me some feedback on what I'm doing, you just have these moments and you go, oh, wow, I can really feel that differently, It's a really cool experience. And then when you get out of that structural balance phase, when you move into the more advanced stuff, so we talk about those people that are beyond that point and they're at this, because what happens is Yanni talked about this initial growth that people get, and they get this spurt of muscle growth and of strength growth just from doing basic stuff, but eventually that plateaus, and that's where program periodization comes in. And if you've never heard of program periodization before, it's where you modify or you alter any number of several variables. So it's exercise selection, it's tempo, which is basically how slow you go down, how fast you come up, and any pauses between it. It's the amount of weight you lift, which is also related to the amount of reps you do. So going from 12 reps per set down to 3 reps per set, for example. And it's also volume, the amount of volume that you're doing. And so program periodization is when you do a 4-week program phase, and then you go to a new program phase and you change some of those variables. But then what happens is in later phases of muscle hypertrophy, we start using things like overload techniques. So ones that most people have heard of in the gym is a superset, which is where you take two exercises and you perform one directly after the other with less than a 10-second break. And another one that a lot of people have heard of is drop sets, where you do one exercise and then you reduce the weight and then you do the same exercise again with less weight, and you can do several drops. But those are just two of the more common ones. There's so many of them. There's 21s, there's wave loading, there's 1-5 methods, there's rest pause method. And all of them are really designed to force this adaptation, to take you, you've plateaued, you've come to this point where you've adapted to what you're doing, and we're going to force you to that next level. And that's where, in my experience, that's where the real discomfort starts to come in. If you've never felt that third day DOMS after a good leg session, try doing supersets or drop sets on your squats.
Yeah, look, it's just about packing in more stimulus, more volume into the workout, and being able to take the body to failure as over and over and over again. And it's brutal, it's not comfortable. It's not meant to be comfortable, because you're stimulating the muscle to the point of neuromuscular failure. It can feel awful, and frankly, most people, when they first start, are just not capable of that, because by that stage, you have to have all of the other basic stuff on autopilot. Like form and technique has to be on autopilot by that time. You can't be taking the muscle to failure when you've got poor form or technique in any of the movements, because you're at an enormous risk of injury at that point. And then you've got the other sort of, I guess, recovery response too. Like if you do it too early, the physical discomfort that you find yourself in after a workout, you'll probably not be able to train again for several days, which destroys that week or microcycle in the program. So there's no point rushing into it. And I know it feels, people come into our UMS app if they're just joining up to put on some muscle, and they often want to, dive straight into those workouts. But it's super important that you don't, that you just follow the steps, follow the process, iron out any structural imbalances early on in those first 3 phases. We do a technique optimization phase at phase 4, and then we go into it from phase 5 with the overload methods. And then from phase 5 all the way to phase 12, they get harder every time. And that part of that is just introducing people to those overload methods. Part of it is about, just being exposed and figuring out what you like and what works well. And then it's, there's so many different overload methods. We only introduce you to 9, but I think 8 or 9. Eight. And they're the most common ones that we really enjoy using. That you can get really fancy and you can get really creative in program design. And the sky's the limit, I guess. But what we want to do during that first 12 months of training is just introduce people to different styles of training, different methods. And then from there, you can really go at it from all sorts of different angles. It gets quite fun.
But if you are still somebody that hasn't, gone past that, what we call the beginner phase, it's really important that you focus on your technique optimization first. It really is. And if we talk a little bit now about rest and recovery, because this is something that I definitely didn't understand earlier on in my training phases. And that is that, the whole idea of going to the gym and doing a resistance training session is that you create a stimulus. So we've talked about that. You do a bunch of sets of weight on your chest, and that's a stimulus to your pecs and your triceps and your shoulders that is there to tell the body, let's grow some muscle. But then the muscle growth occurs during recovery. So, and generally speaking, most people agree that it usually takes 48 to 72 hours for the muscles to recover enough to be able to perform optimally again. There's plenty of different ways that you can use in more advanced programming methods where you go in intentionally into a state of repeated fatigue day after day, so that you then have an extended recovery period to get growth. But if we just talk about general training for the year round, I think for the average person, it's a good idea to not train the same muscle groups more than 2 or 3 times a week, and to really be focusing on recovery outside of that. I think a lot of people get wrong, and what I certainly got wrong in my early years was thinking that, I could go to the gym and smash myself, and then on my rest days, I don't go to the gym, but I can stay up late and play video games, or I can drink some beers, or just chill. And you can do that, but you are interfering with your recovery, because when you're asleep, that's when the greatest growth is occurring. And so if you're not getting good quality sleep, if you're not having, if you don't have a good circadian rhythm where you're going to bed reasonably within a couple of hours after the sun goes down, and you're waking up roughly when the sun comes up, then you won't have the same growth, the same muscle growth that you will if you're doing the exact same workouts, but you were getting good recovery. And then, of course, there's protein optimization and supplementation. I've actually been on the, I've been working to build my testosterone naturally for the past, I'd say probably 6 months or so, by using the supplements that I've been learning from people like Andrew Huberman, Ben Pakulski, and another guy called, I can't remember his name, someone Attia. He's a medical doctor. But these are, and Lane Norton as well. We live in this great era where there's people that know far more than you or me that are doing the research for us. People used to say, have you done your own research? Well, the research that I do is I go to people that have got PhDs and that are talking about, this is what has been shown clinically to be able to boost testosterone. And so when I look at my desk here, I've got 9 supplements that I'm taking, and I just got my bloods tested last week for the first time in about 12 months. I'm getting the results next week, and I'm really looking forward to it, because I got my total testosterone and my free testosterone tested, and that's why I'm really interested to see what it is. And I got all the other markers of health tested as well. I'm testing my cholesterol and my fasting glucose and all that stuff. But I will share with you guys what those results are, because the last time I got my testosterone tested, about 9 or 10 months ago, it was way higher than it was the time before, and I was only doing half of what I'm doing now. And so, so for me, not drinking alcohol, increasing testosterone as much as I can naturally, which includes getting good sleep, making sure that I'm getting, 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight per day in several meals throughout the day. There's all these things that you can do to really boost your chances of building muscle. And we'll do another show on that, because that's a whole, that's a whole show in itself, isn't it, Yanni? Just talking about all the things that you can do when it comes to recovery.
Did I hear right in a post recently that you've given up coffee as well?
I've given up coffee. I am now. Wow. It's been 4 weeks since I've had a drop of coffee. I have black tea now.
But you're still getting caffeine in the black tea.
Yeah, but honestly, man, it is different to coffee.
Really?
It is not like coffee. I was having a strong coffee, and the black tea that I'm having, you get you just kind of go, oh, that's nice. But the coffee was like, woo, like this, And
I'm having a herbal Twinings this morning, but
nice.
I will have a coffee after this. Yeah.
Yeah. But, and so I'm on a real mission to boost my testosterone as much as I can, and to really, biohack, I guess, so I'm not drinking alcohol at all. I still sleep 8 hours every night. I'm waiting to get these blood tests, because I've had a lot of people, I shouldn't say a lot, I've had 4 or 5 people ask me recently online, what do I do to boost testosterone? What supplements do I take? So I wanted to get my bloods tested first, so I could go look at what this has done. So as soon as I get those results this Friday, I will do a video on it, guys, and maybe we can discuss it next week on the live show. We'll do that, actually. We will do that, because I'll have my testosterone results, and we can discuss what I've done to be able to get the results that I've had, and we'll do a show that's specific on supplementation for building muscle and rest and recovery, like all the things that you do. Now, before we go, let's Peter Attia, that's right. Let's
I said Simon. I got it completely wrong.
Peter Attia, yeah. Look, and Peter, I will say this, guys. There's to be able to be at the level of somebody like Peter Attia, Lane Norton, Ben Pekulski, Andrew Huberman. Like somebody like Yanni and me will never compete with those people on their level of knowledge and understanding of science and scientific research. And so I steer clear of that lane. I don't try to come off as somebody that knows that stuff. So when people ask me these questions, I just say, look, I follow these guys and they do the research for me. Because we do get people here and there saying, oh, what research have you done on that? And I say, I've just watched people that have PhDs tell me that this is what the current research is saying, you know. And Yanni and I are also fortunate enough to have friends that have PhDs that we can actually reach out to and have conversations with and get any deeper questions answered. So, all right, let's jump into these questions. So, Yanni, if you want to bring up your live chat as well so that you can see what I'm reading. I've got Andreas is saying, hello, guys. I stumbled on your video based on improving shoulder mobility. I do have a question. When I try front raises overhead, arms overhead, I get tension without any pain in my posterior deltoid and also get some sort of rib flaring with that. Could you guess what that would be the case? I would guess that is a lack of mobility, that you are suffering a lack of shoulder mobility because you're describing this movement, and a lack of shoulder flexion, that's called shoulder flexion, is just so common. And if you get to a point where you're feeling it in your posterior deltoid, that's when your lats and your pecs are tightening, they're getting to their end range, and the posterior deltoid doesn't have the strength to lift anymore, and the only way that you can go any higher really is for your ribs to flare out.
And one of the best ways to help I think the be all and end all stretch for that is body weight hanging.
Yeah,
as much of it as you can
body
get.
Weight hanging is so good.
Body weight hanging is it's not going to happen really quickly. It's depending on also how old you are. I don't know how old you are, Andreas, but the older you get, the longer it takes to sort of open things up again. But yeah, just work
the first
on
point
that
of
flexibility.
Call. Try to do an accumulated 60 to 90 seconds of hanging a day. That's a really good start point. And then if you can work up to doing 3 or 4 minutes a day, that's an accumulated total, you know, so you could do 30-second sets or whatever. That's a really good start point. So let's have a look at the next one. We've got Jordan Johnson here. So Jordan is saying, this might sound weird, but ever since doing weighted stretching, I've noticed almost a magnetism, like turn to see who walked in when I walked in the room. It's like an animalistic influence I have. Well, there you go. I haven't experienced that yet, but it sounds like you're having a higher calling there, Jordan. But yeah, that's awesome, man. Sounds like you're doing well. If anybody's got any last questions for us, hit us up in the chat quickly, and let us know if you've enjoyed this live stream before we shut it down. It's something that I kind of miss it. I miss going live. I know Yanni does. Yanni, I've got.
I've been hassling you to go live for bloody years.
Yeah, we have. But in all fairness, it's the time because we're aware that the majority of our audience is over in the US and in Europe. So if we go live at a time that's more suitable to us later in the day, everybody's asleep overseas. So I hope this time works for you guys. We're going to do this.
If you have liked it, do us a favor and gently caress the like button.
Yeah,
have you got a speaker on? Have you got a speaker on in the background or something, Rad? I can hear an echo in your room.
I do. I've got my headphones sitting there so that I can hear, because I have to work out how I can not hear myself through my own headphones because it wigs me out, and that's why I don't have my headphones on. Thank you, Apple State Jag and Jordan Johnson for the praise on the stream. That's really nice to hear. I'm happy that you guys heard it. And of course, if you guys have topics that you want us to talk about, let us know, because that's what we're here for. You know, we threw this topic out because Yanni and I just looked back on our podcast, and one of our most listened to podcasts was one that was just about the essentials of strength and conditioning training. And if you didn't know, we're up to episode 396 of our podcast. This is going to be episode 397. So we've almost hit 400 podcasts. I think that puts us in like the top 0.2% of podcasts or something like that, you know?
Yeah, I get solicited daily by people trying to grow our podcast reach, telling us how incredible it is that we've got that many episodes.
Yeah, it is. All right, thanks so much for tuning in, everybody.
I think the only thing that proves is how old we are now.
It does. It does. But yeah, nonetheless, look, it was fun. It was a fun return. And next week on Monday, we will talk all about supplements to boost testosterone, what I'm doing to naturally boost testosterone. We'll go through my results, and then Yanni will also talk about just the general principles of rest and recovery to maximize muscle growth. See you soon, everybody.
All right. Take care. All good.